Hello. Okay, so the system video no longer exists due to issues with YouTube. Therefore, I'm re-recording my bit of it. You don't get the nice little example clips, I'm afraid. Okay, so character, 3 statistics: health, sanity, and strength. 2 skills: melee combat, ranged combat. You might have another skill: escape, or medicine, or first aid, or maybe some combination of the 3. You will also have your sanity and 2 permanent coping strategies. You will not have any other listed skills. Your written background covers the things that you might want to do during the game. Read the whole character sheet carefully. The passing reference to topiary, you might be able to use it in the game. If you think you should have a skill which isn't on your background, you might be able to persuade a ref. Talk to us. We are not playing within the Warzone rules this weekend, so I'm not going to include those in this brief. I might re-record this with an example video for future plays. Okay, combat. Room 13 runs a non-contact system. Any combat should be mimed in a slow and safe manner. The only physical contact that is acceptable is within the surprise attack rules. Every character has a rank in both combat skills, even if you're entirely untrained. If you're entirely untrained, it's going to be 5. Okay. Melee combat skill indicates how many times you have to throw a punch for one of them to hit. Melee combat skill is 1. You're brilliant. You will hit every single time. Melee combat skill is 3. You miss twice before you throw your connecting punch. These misses represent your punch going wide, being dodged, being deflected by the other combatant. In combat, when you throw a missing punch, you should mime it going wide and call miss. So for example, I have a real problem with my beautiful little Pusheen here, which I hope you can see. Okay, 1, miss, 2. Pusheen is angry at me. Okay. So when you throw your connecting punch, you mime it, you call your damage. Did you see what I did wrong there? I actually hit Pusheen in a non-combat contact system. Bad mesh. Okay. Damage is based on your strength, which is why I called 2. If you are unarmed and untrained, your damage is just your strength score. If you have an improvised weapon, your damage is your strength score plus 1. It causes weapon damage if it's an appropriate choice. You cannot hit Pusheen with a cushion. Okay. If you have an actual weapon, your damage is your strength score plus 2. So let's imagine I had a knife. Miss. 4. Pusheen is most unhappy. Okay. Weapon damage always requires medical attention of some kind. If you do not get medical attention, either medicine or first aid, then every 2 hours until you receive medical attention, you will lose 1 point of damage. Once you get medical attention, you will not lose further points from that wound. If you receive first aid or medicine, your damage counts as normal damage. If you are incapacitated, which means you reach 0 in a combat situation where you take weapon damage, you do not recover until you receive medical aid. So you're either knocked unconscious, though you will regain consciousness after the 5 minutes of unconsciousness, you still can't move until you receive medical aid, or at least you can't move under your own steam. If such aid is not supplied within 30 minutes, you die. Feel free to scream for help if you are not unconscious. Feel free to make as much noise as you want to. That might come with downsides. Okay, average human health score is 8. When your health score reaches 0, you are incapacitated or knocked out. If the blow that takes you to 0 was to your head, you will be knocked out for approximately 5 minutes. If the character that is hitting you wants to keep hitting you, it will take them 2 minutes of continually curb stomping or pummeling you to brutally kill you. If the blow was to any other part of your body, you are incapacitated in an appropriate way for about 15 minutes. So you can't move effectively under your own steam. You can scream. You can beg for help. Roleplay it. After the recovery time, you should still be showing effects of the unconsciousness or incapacitation. For example, you might be unsteady on your feet after being unconscious. You might be left with a limp if your leg was incapacitated. Roleplay it. If a character's health score is reduced to 0 by weapon damage, then you are dying. If it is reduced to 0 by normal damage, you're not, but you're in a very vulnerable situation. Okay. If you have received weapon damage and you are dying, unless a character with first aid or medicine attends to them within 30 minutes, they will die. If a character's health score is on 0 when they receive further weapon damage, it is treated as a coup de grace and they will die. A character with first aid can spend 5 minutes tending to the character, binding their wounds, restoring 1 point of health, unless the wounded person is on 0, in which case they remain on 0 but are treated as if they've taken normal damage, so they're not dying anymore. You can't use first aid on the same wound more than once. A character with medicine can spend an hour performing surgery on a wounded character to restore 2 points of health. Health points lost from normal damage can be recovered by a good night's sleep. Health points lost from weapon damage are not recovered by a good night's sleep. Surprise attacks. If you take somebody completely unawares, you don't have to count out your blows and your misses. You can hit with 1 blow. This does your normal amount of strength damage, but will be an instant knockout. The victim will be unconscious for approximately 5 minutes. To make a surprise attack, you call surprise attack and state your normal damage whilst placing your hand on the victim's shoulder. That's how we know if it's a surprise attack. If you are attempting a surprise attack with a firearm, it's a coup de grace. I'll get to that in a minute. Grapple. Grapples are based on your strength. If your strength score is higher than the person you are grappling, they're pinned. Several people can combine their strength scores to help pin someone. This is restricted based on how many people could get a decent grip on the person being pinned. If you want to help a person being pinned by multiple people, then you can grapple one of them, and this will become a separate grapple, thus helping the initial person being pinned. Remember, still non-contact, you should never actually physically grapple another player. Mime it with respect to the other player's boundaries. You can see, maybe, the photo next to this shows a player resting his hands upon another player's shoulders. That's fine. That's not grappling them. Grappling is getting a grip on. If the other player is comfortable with that, that's okay. If they're not, a couple of inches. Escape. Okay, the escape skill allows you to escape from a successful grapple once. To do this, call escape and move away from the player or players grappling you. If you do not move away, they can grapple you again. If you move towards another player who wishes to grapple you, they can do so. If you are grappling someone who uses the escape skill, you must give them the opportunity to move away before you attempt a new grapple. If you have the escape skill, it will be ranked. This score is the number of times you can use escape in 1 day. It will be refreshed by a good night's sleep. For this weekend, escape also has another use, which is against the influence skill, which doesn't exist in our system. Funny. If a player is attempting to use the influence skill on you, they will say, "I think you'll agree that..." the sky is green, or whatever they're trying to get you to agree. If you are influenced, then you will act in accordance to what they've just influenced you with. If you are not, if you are deciding to escape, then you are not affected by the influence skill, but it does count as one of your escape uses for that day. Strangulation. In order to strangle a person, you must first grapple and pin them. You must then announce that you're strangling them and maintain the grapple. After 20 seconds, slow count it with Mississippi's. The victim is unconscious. Every 20 seconds after that, their hit points drop by 1. Unless their health reaches 0, it's counted as normal damage. If you strangle them until their health reaches 0, it's counted as weapon damage and they will need medical attention to recover. If you strangle them for a further 2 minutes beyond this point, they will die. Make sure the struggle is role-played appropriately and doesn't make your victim unduly uncomfortable. The victim can thrash about and make strangled sounds, but they cannot scream or shout for help. Garroting. I'm not going to go through garroting. I'm not going to go through poison. Have a feel you can read it. If you manage to find some garroting wire in this system, refs will silently scream and allow you to garrot. Again, it's weapon damage, a rate of 2 per 20 seconds. There shouldn't be any poisons in this game. If you manage to make a poison, a ref will silently scream and obey the poison rules. Okay, ranged combat. Your ranged combat skill indicates how long it takes you to aim and fire a gun in seconds. The lower your score, the better shot you are. To use a gun, hold it up, aim it at your target, count down your score. Use Mississippi to make sure you don't count too fast. When you reach 0, you can pull the trigger, and if the cap goes off, you call the name of your target. If the weapon being fired is larger than a handgun, it's helpful to shout the damage of the weapon as well. For example, a character fires an M16 at a gibbering monster. They would call, "Gibbering monster thing, 8!" The fiend from beyond the stars will then take 8 points of damage. If the cap doesn't go off, you misfired, probably run. You don't have to count loudly enough for everyone to hear. However, the refs should be able to tell that you're counting. So whisper it, mouth it, nod to yourself. If you have a high score, you might find your target moves while you're aiming. Your target must be in line of sight when you pull the trigger. Whatever your score, you can choose to pull the trigger without aiming. This is for roleplay purposes only. It's highly unlikely to hit what you want it to hit. A ref will let you know if you've hit anything. Gun damage. Gun will cause the amount of weapon damage. The damage comes off the target's health score unless the wound table... we're ignoring the wound table. The damage comes off the target's health score. Sidearm does 6 points of damage. Rifle or shotgun does 7 points of damage. If the gun isn't standard, there'll be a purple note on it, or a ref will inform you prior to the gun's use. Location of the gunshot can be at player's discretion unless it's a coup de grace. Coup de grace, the headshot. If a target is unmoving, grappled or unconscious, or otherwise incapacitated or unable to defend themselves, the attacker may call a coup de grace. This is FISREP'd by standing a few feet away from them or within melee range and striking or shooting them. The affected target immediately dies. This can only be attempted with a weapon, and not an improvised weapon either. Ammunition. Ammunition is represented by caps. Doesn't matter what the IC caliber is, you use caps for handguns. Shotgun ammunition, caps sit in cartridges. Do not exchange those caps with handgun caps. Blast radiuses from explosions will be represented by confetti. Small explosive is represented by yellow confetti, a large explosive by pink. Each of the player's body area is covered in yellow confetti. you lose 1 point of health. For pink, you lose 2 points per body area. It is weapon damage. Body areas are right leg, torso, right arm, left arm, head. So if you've only got yellow confetti on your left leg, then that's 1 hit point lost. If you have pink confetti on both legs, that's 4 hit points lost. Okay, let's move on to sanity. Character's sanity is a value running from 1 to 5, with 5 being stable for that character. Sanity effects are rated as 1 to 3 or purple 1 to 3. If a player is exposed to a normal sanity effect, they immediately lose that amount of sanity. They must react appropriately. During the day, players may see and interact with situations that they feel may affect their particular character. Feel free to make use of your coping mechanisms and insanity as appropriate. Sanity can be restored by indulging in one or more of your coping mechanisms. By using a coping mechanism, you regain a point of sanity. If you get a good night's sleep, then at ref discretion, you may regain up to 1 point in addition to your use of coping mechanisms. Each character has 2 coping mechanisms, 1 active and 1 passive. You may only use 1 coping mechanism per sanity effect. Coping mechanisms should be role-played for an appropriate length of time. If it's not indicated on your character sheet, please role-play appropriate to the mechanism. For example, you see a brutal murder. That might be enough to shake your faith in humanity and is a 1 point sanity effect. You are shaken, but you have your coping mechanism of a stiff drink and recover that lost point. However, you later witness a police phone box disappear before your eyes. Such a thing defies the laws of physics, and your character's world is turned upside down. This is a 3 point sanity effect. No matter how many times you use your coping mechanism, you can never recover more than 1 of those lost sanity points. And you might want to decide that your coping mechanism of obsessive compulsion is more appropriate to the situation, maybe because you already finished your flask. In which case, use that. Each character tends towards a form of insanity described on their character sheet. These are left deliberately broad for player interpretation based on the horror that you're faced with. The lower a character's sanity becomes, the more pronounced your insanity is. At 0, a character is insane, and you must act out your insanity to the fullest. If you've lost 1 point of sanity and regain that point by using a coping mechanism, then you don't need to roleplay your insanity. The exception to roleplaying through your insanity is when faced with a purple sanity threat. These are usually attached to unseen sanity threats, which will be described by a ref. The player can choose to use their coping mechanism in order to cope with the threat, but if they choose not to use your coping mechanism, rather than play through insanity, you play through the specific urge attached to the purple sanity threat. The ref will give you it. For example, you're walking down an apparently empty corridor when the ref informs you that for a briefest instant, non-Euclidean shapes filter across your consciousness. You have an urge to get inside a completely spherical environment. It's a level 1 purple sanity threat. The player decides to have a stiff drink. Urge becomes a passing memory. Later, you walk through a deserted garden. You see nothing, but a purple ref note gives you the urge to talk excitedly about meteors from outer space. It is a 2 point sanity threat. You decide not to make use of your coping mechanisms. You go inside. You talk about the wonders of meteors for a good 20 minutes. Okay. Let's go through system calls. 6 system calls, 4 only to be used by refs. Man down can be used by anyone within the game, and safe word can be used by players at any time. Time in is a ref call, means the game has started. Sometimes it's called more than once if you're not in a small area. It's also shouted after time freeze to let players know to unfreeze. Time freeze, it's a ref call, means that players must freeze, ideally close your eyes, and wait for refs to call time in. Do not communicate with other players at this time. If you need clarification on instructions, then talk to the refs delivering them. The ref team might use this opportunity to describe something that will happen to all players on unfreezing, or the ref team might use this opportunity to move something into position without being seen. Time freeze only ends when a ref calls time in. Characters should continue with what they were doing as though no break had occurred. Drop. Ref call. Called at a specific player, meaning that they should drop to the floor and await specific instruction from a ref. Not a time freeze. Other players can roleplay around them appropriately, although if you're not in drop, please try and ignore what the ref is telling the player that is in drop. Man down. This can be used by anyone. It is to be used to raise an alarm that the person has been injured or is suffering a medical emergency. If you hear the call, stop what you're doing. First aiders respond to this by heading to call's location. First aiders are in charge during a man down call and give instruction if they need assistance. Safe word. This can be used by players at any point during the game. It's to be used to indicate to the nearest ref that the player, not the character, is distressed and needs to be taken out of an in-game situation. If possible, other players should continue to roleplay, disregarding the character's absence. If not possible, treat it as a time freeze and refs will time you back in. Time out. Ref call means that the game has ended. As with time in, might need to be called several times in a large location. Okay, that gives you a quick intro to our system. If you're watching this, probably see you at the weekend.